Okay, my memory was full, but I'm gonna wrap this up pretty quickly anyway, because it's already gone on way too long. But yeah, so if you're out there, Donnie, I really am sorry. I really never meant to hurt you. And I don't think doing things like that is meant to hurt anyone. Because lots of people had uncomfortable nicknames in school. I don't think anybody means to hurt anybody when they do that. It took me a long time to figure that out. I certainly didn't have it in my heart to hurt him. I just felt like I was having fun with other kids. And I didn't know that I was having fun at his expense. You know what I mean? So, again, Donnie, if you're out there, I'm so sorry. And I remember telling my mother about it. And I had apologized to him right away. Because I didn't know it was something he didn't like. Because it's not how I was raised, and if you're raised the right way, you won't do that. You know, you won't intentionally try to hurt someone, and I feel like a lot of what happened to me was intentional. Because I was the easy target. I cried. You could make me cry. I don't know how you can make yourself feel better by making someone else cry. Never understood that, but I wasn't raised that way. Thank you so much for coming into Punky's most personal world. The next video will be all about my great-grandmother, my brick wall. Probably do that in a couple of days. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed your time in Punky's world. Hope to see you again. Please hit that subscribe button. Goodbye and God bless you. Welcome to Punky's world. I'm so glad you're in it. I am Punky, otherwise known as Angelina Wilson. Today, I'm going to talk to you about bullying and my experience. I did this on Kid Missing Radio. I will link that. But before I get there, I just want to give you a little site update. As you can see, my makeup is done. I just did a vlog where I did that. That's uploading. Another thing is that I've added a new playlist called Genealogy, because I thought I would go through my great-grandmother brick wall and things like that with you that I think are fun. You know, and all my exciting finds and new family, and because I do have some, ouch, excitement in that area. The stone cleaning vlog, I may switch from vlog to genealogy. Just so you know. Thank you so much. This is difficult. When I was in school, I was bullied terribly. I saw an article recently and it made me want to do a Kid Missing Radio about bullying, and I'm glad I did, because I talked about things I've never talked about before, and now I'm going to talk about them here. There. When I was in elementary school, I did not have the best social skills, didn't know how to interact. Let me give you a little background on me before we talk about the bullying. I was born with deformities and health issues. I have pectus excavatum, which is literally excavated chest. pectus chest, excavatum, excavation, hole. Because my sternum, instead of doing this number, does this one, which means that the ribs connected to it also go underneath, and they're kind of a permanent underwire under my boobs. But it also means that because there's a hole there, my boobs go out like this when I lay down, and it's horrible. And I was told by a cardiologist, just as I was starting to develop, that once I developed, nobody noticed it. It would hide it. You were wrong, dude. You know, looking back, kind of, what you talking about, Willis? It's worse, you know. But you can't really tell whether it's going to get better, worse, or, you know, well, worse or stay the same, basically. I know that mine is big enough that it qualifies for surgery. I really do not want that surgery. So, I was born with a dislocated hip, and a few hours after my birth, I had a lack of oxygen. Nobody knows why I stopped breathing, but I stopped breathing. A nurse raced me back to the incubator and saved my life. I, however, in the time that I lacked oxygen, was brain damaged. My frontal lobe to the left was brain damaged. The damage affected my fine motor skills, which means my handwriting is absolutely atrocious. It affected my impulse control, because that's a big part of what the frontal lobe does. So I would interrupt, and I would oops, sorry. I didn't have any control over, if I had an impulse to do something, I did it, you know. I would interrupt, and I was the kid in the neighborhood who led, you know, led a little too much. I'll admit that. I would say, you do this and you say this, and we'll play this, and yeah, no, can't do that. It caused OCD behaviors, like flipping light switches 4 times at night, which must have driven my parents absolutely mad. But they never said a word about it. You know, I will say that. My father was extremely impatient with me in a lot of things, but he also recognized my disabilities. I have come a huge way. I have learned techniques for impulse control, for interrupting, and I don't try to run the show anymore so much. I'm very impatient. Because I am impulsive, I'm very impatient. If something's going to get done, I want it done now. If you say you're going to be here at a certain time, you be here at that time. Because if you're late, I panic. I admit that. I don't know if it's a result of the damage to my brain, the insult, the injury to my brain, but I've always had pretty severe anxiety, which I've been working on with a therapist who's been helping me with what's called box breathing, and how do I put this? Staying in the moment, but that's not mindfulness, and both really help. And I'm starting to incorporate them into me, you know, into what I do. And I have to tell you, the video's already up. I was at a party yesterday. I was expecting my friend, her siblings, her parents, her friend that I adore, and a whole bunch of kids. I was not expecting what I walked into. Aunts and uncles on both sides of the family, all kinds of friends, a bajillion children. I was overwhelmed. I just wanted to sit somewhere. I just wanted to, too much. It was sensory overload. And I have that problem. And it is believed at this point by both my late mother and I, there we go, that I have Asperger's, a form of autism, which has nothing to do with my brain injury, but my brain injury does deal with impulse control, and like I said, I don't know if it has anything to do with my anxiety. I admit I was, to the other kids, a strange kid because I did lack that. I wanted so desperately to be a part of everything, and that just wasn't happening for me. I remember getting punched in the stomach for simply wanting to jump rope. I remember every day in 5th grade being chased by a 6th grade boy and beat up. Excuse me. I remember in high school, one of my special needs teachers taking me over to the little kids' playground because the two schools were connected at the place where I went to high school, in the town where I went to high school. And she said, "See, they're chasing each other." Yes, this little boy and girl were chasing each other. They were playing chase. They were laughing. They were having fun. I didn't know how to tell her that what had happened to me was he beat me up every day. I would hide under the SPED room window, SPED being special education, also called the resource room, or if you were unlucky enough to be in it, the or reject room. Or another word that starts with an R that YouTube would have a fit about, and I regularly have a fit about when I hear it used in a negative way. Hate that friggin' word. And closer. There we go. Anyway, I would hide there because it was the only place I could stay away from him. And my teacher knew that, and I apologize for the lawn care sounds if you can hear them. I'm not sure you can because I'm actually using my microphone today. One day, he beat me up, had me sitting on the side of the hill. I wish I could explain to you. Maybe I could draw it while I'm talking, so you get an idea of what I'm talking about. Anyway, he got me on the side of the hill, and the hill is me. I'm just gonna draw stick figures because I am. It's him, his friend, and I'm sitting on the ground. I'm gonna draw my arms differently. Oh God. And he says to his friend, "Let's strip her and watch her F herself." I didn't know what that meant. Here's the hill. Here's me sitting. And here's them standing. And, well, whatever. And you get the idea. Anyway, the point is, here's the hill. They're standing in front of me. I'm just doing stick figures. And I'm looking around. Teacher over here. But that particular teacher despised me. And when you look over here, there's nothing. All through here, it's nothing. Over here is a dome jungle gym. And back behind me is a big jungle gym with like all sorts of stuff on it. Way back here in the woods is the swing set. Okay. Rock up here and stuff. Let me show you. Just pretend these are other people. This is us. This is the teacher. This is the school building, by the way. She is standing next to the school building. The school building is right. See where this dome is? Oh, I'm not holding it up high enough. Where the dome is at the bottom. Oh, my finger's on it. Right there. The school building's over here. And the teacher's standing on the side of the school building. And this is a big school building. We're up on this hill, up here. I'm looking over here. There is, when you look at this picture, okay, this here is all dirt and nothingness at the bottom of the hill. You'd have to go a long way to get to, well, this here. You had to go a long way to get to the dome, where I knew I would be safe. Behind me is big monkey bars, and way up here, up here in the woods is a swing set. I don't know who thought of this particular layout, but it was terrible. It was terrible because that area in the middle was just hard dirt, ledge, dirt. Grass wouldn't have grown there if you'd have paid it to grow there. Now it's a parking lot, which is really weird. But that's what I was dealing with at the time. And sitting in the middle of that hill, looking around saying, okay, there's nowhere I can go, because I can't run fast enough to get past them because they were standing in front of me. And I'm wondering, okay, if he takes my clothes off, first of all, I'm going to be cold. Second, Mrs. Whalen, who was the teacher pictured, is going to be mad at me. Because A, she doesn't like me, and B, it's always my fault. So, I always get blamed. So, I knew I was screwed. I also knew it was fall. It was probably, I'm going to say around October, maybe early November, because it was breezy and I was wearing a windbreaker jacket. I wasn't wearing a heavy winter jacket, so I'm going to say it was fall. Like I said, October, November, that area. This was in the 80s, and his friend talked him out of doing that to me, and I was able to get away. But to sit there, and my legs were in this weird position, and hear someone say that, someone who's in 6th grade, when you're in 5th grade, and you have no idea what that word means, especially not in that context. I mean, I'd heard that word in an angry context, like, oh, you know, but I've never heard that word in a sexual context. You know what I mean? So I didn't understand what was going on. So I didn't know what he wanted me to do, and I didn't know what he'd do to me if I didn't do what he wanted me to do. Those are all the things that were going through my head. And I never told my mother about that until many years later. I used to feel so bad about myself in that school that I would literally lock myself in a bathroom stall. This is Miss Claustrophobia. And I would lock myself in a bathroom stall, and I would call my mother and walk up the hill and get me out of the bathroom stall, and it was awful. There were a couple of times I literally ran away from school and went home. You're probably thinking, you know, because it sounds weird, but I much rather would have been home with my, I much would have rather, I'll get the words out one day, have been at home with my mom. And my mom would call the principal. So this happened probably 3-4 times. She would say, she's here. I'm not sending her back. You know. And one year it was so bad And I don't remember the whole story around it, but there was a lot going on this particular year, including the fact that the state was coming in to deal with the school. And yeah, it was horrible that I got sent home from school 2 weeks early. But like I said, I didn't know exactly what was going on. I know the state was coming in because my mother had gone to the police. They wouldn't let me use the bathroom at this point, and it was horrible. And one day, some of the kids from school were in my yard riding bikes and playing with me, and my mother called them in the house. Come here. I gotta ask you something. And they're like, what? And she's like, not like that. I said that terribly. But they're like, what, Mrs. Wilson, you know? And she said, why do you come here and play nice with my daughter, but you're so mean to her at school? And they said, because the teacher doesn't like her, and we don't want the teacher not to like us. Excuse me? What? You know, I mean, can you even imagine as a parent hearing that from a child? I mean, that had to just have blown the top of her head off. I can't even imagine, you know, like a cartoon. I can't even imagine how she felt hearing that. And I never knew it till years later. She was my greatest advocate. She really, truly was. I was, as I said in my last video, I was so lucky to have my mother. I know I had the mother God wanted me to have, you know, and I'm so grateful for her, even though some say she protected me a little too much, but she also prepared me for this world without her, and that is something that I think a lot of people wondered if I would be able to handle, if I would be able to be on my own without her. Everybody has said how proud they are of me. Who do you think was taking care of her? The woman was virtually bedridden the last year of her life. Yeah, sure, she wrote the checks, but I knew how to do it. You know, in terms of bills and stuff. Like I said, I knew how to do it, and I've been doing it. My bills are paid. That third of the month, those bills are paid. So, I knew, like I said, that I could do it. Did it? Oh, I'm sorry. Did it take some work? Heck yeah. But fortunately, I could do things my mother didn't know I could do, which are things like walking downtown. She didn't think I could do that from here. She thought it was too far from my hip. And does my hip pay for it sometimes? Hell yeah. But I am so grateful to be able to do it. Today I haven't walked at all because it's Sunday, it's hot, and I just wanted to chill. So, get these videos out. Bullying is something that I don't believe any child should have to experience, and I used to be so fearful of the kids that I knew when they would start school, you know, because I was never blessed with my own children. That's why my missing children, link in the description to my other channel, my original channel, are so important to me, because they are my kids. There was a great article written about me in our local free newspaper. It's called the Tribune, and it said that I have thousands of children and they're all missing. That was the headline. Angelina Wilson has thousands of children and they're all missing. And it was a beautiful article, and I'm so grateful. I actually contacted them and asked them about running something about my channel, and my podcast and stuff. And they said, sure, because I had met the gentleman. We had like a career day when I was in high school, and I had met the gentleman who was still the editor then. He remembered me, and that's how we were able to work out that he would do the article. I actually wrote for him after that career day. Turns out I have a talent, so it just takes me longer and it's harder, because one of the things about my disability is that I can give you the answers orally, but if you ask me to write the answers down, it's a lot harder and I may not get it right. So, excuse me. And according to the person who tested me, only 1% of people have the discrepancy between their verbal IQ and their functional IQ that I have, where their verbal IQ is much higher than their functional IQ. It's usually the other way around. What you can do is higher than what you can say usually, but in my case it's not. So that makes things a bit challenging. I am grateful to have a computer, though, to be able to type and write. And it gets underlined in red when I misspell it, and I can read it back to myself and say, okay, that doesn't sound right, before I actually click to post something or to print something or whatever. I remember one of the times that I came home from school crying, my mother sitting at the kitchen table crying and saying, my baby comes home crying every day and there's nothing I can do. That leaves an impression on you, because, and I remember my last guest on Kid Missing Radio talking about seeing her father cry when her sister went missing, and the impression that it leaves because you don't see that, you know what I mean? And I understood exactly what she was saying. I mean, I've seen my mother cry way more than I've seen my father cry. And I think anyone with two parents will probably say that. That it's very rare you see your dad cry, because they've been taught and raised to be tough. And they just don't like to show it. I remember seeing my dad cry when one of his best friends was dying from leukemia, and he knew it was near the end. He came home, he sat down, he was sobbing after visiting him, and I'll never forget that, because that was not, Dad didn't cry very much. You might see him shed a tear or two during a movie, absolutely, but because my father was a real man, and as Roddy Piper used to say, real men cry. And he did, he would cry at a movie, but to see him cry over something tangible, real life, it was hard, and it was different. When his friend actually did pass away, I still remember he came into my room. I'd known this man all my life, and he came into my room, and I remember he was playing with the change in his pocket. Dad used to always have his keys and a whole bunch of change just sitting in his pocket back during that time period. Not so much later on, because we would take our change and throw it in a jar later, but back then he always had change. And he was kind of playing with the change in his pocket, and he took it out and he was kind of playing with it in his hand, and I didn't know what was going on exactly. I knew he had just gotten off the phone, and he sat down on the edge of my bed with me, and I thought he was going to say, I'll make a deal with you, like he needed me to do something and he was going to give me some change for doing it or something. You know what I mean? Because I was in my early teens at that point. I was 13, I think. And so I figured that's what he was going to do. It didn't even occur to me until I saw that he was on the verge of crying, and then he told me that he had passed. And I felt horrible because I had something completely different in my head, and I never forgot that. So I don't think you forget your parents crying, and I know that doesn't have anything to do with bullying, but my mother crying did. And you don't forget if your parents are feeling helpless because of you and you're old enough to understand it. You know, you don't forget that. I know my parents had a lot of helpless moments, you know, when I was a baby, when I wasn't old enough to understand it, you know, and they told my parents, oh, she'll never walk or talk. Oops. And then I started school at a wonderful school. I switched over to the school where I was bullied, and they told my parents, she'll never read or write. My mother's like, what are you talking about? She already reads. I had started reading at 4. I had already had a full year of kindergarten, but most of it was done with a tutor. I could clearly read. They said, oh, she memorized that book. No, give her a book and she will read it. That's what my mother told them. Because I was reading independently at 4. I was reading, this dates me a little bit, but Sweet Pickles. Anybody remember Sweet Pickles? If you search on YouTube, you can find Sweet Pickles. There's a gentleman that reads Sweet Pickles books on YouTube. It's really neat. It was the Sweet Pickles bus, and you would get books every month, I think, and it was a preschool thing from the 70s into the early part of the 80s. I got it in late 70s, around 78, 77, 78, and it was like, you know, she couldn't believe that they would say that, because I could, and I could write my name, and I had already memorized my first telephone number, and it's funny, that's what I use as my code to get into my computer. It's that very first telephone number I memorized. Somebody said, oh my goodness, that's a brilliant idea. Because it's not something anybody will figure out, although I do have a friend that knows what it is. And I'm glad, because if God forbid anything ever happened, you know, if somebody ever did anything to me or anything, or if I was sick in the hospital, she could get in my computer if I needed anything, or my tablet. So, I think it's important that you have someone that you trust that has those numbers. Because I've seen a lot doing the missing and stuff, where people's phones are locked out, their tablets are locked out, their computers are locked out, whatever it may be, because nobody had that 4-digit code. Have someone that you truly trust have your code to get into your devices if anything were to happen to you. And I should be saying this on Kid Missing, but but it's important, I think. You know, on the Kid Missing radio episode, I talked about things like Columbine, where they did it in large part because they felt bullied, they felt outcast. That kind of thing never crossed my mind. But you understand their pain and how I almost think they wanted to inflict their pain on someone else, but in a worse way, if that makes sense. In all of those cases. I'm not making excuses for any of those shootings. I'm just saying that you can almost see that that's what they were doing. I was fortunate enough, although we did have our childish fights, to live in a neighborhood that you just don't see anymore today, you know. I showed it to you. If you go over to the video, I'll put it in the cards of me walking through my neighborhood, and me going through the parking lot and talking about the stupid fence that's up. You'll see how I grew up. 3 houses, actually there were 4 houses right there. And we all knew each other. We all, you know, all the kids hung out, all the moms hung out. It was a great way to grow up, even though we had our childish moments. And the moms had their moments, but that never affected the kids. They would not let it affect the kids. None of the moms. Even when they had their moments with each other, kids were not affected. And I know that I was blessed in that way, and much preferred being at home. Loved my summer vacations. I used to like, when I was a little bit older, my dad would take a nap after work because he worked long, hard hours in a mill. And summertime it's horrible. And I mean, it's hard in the wintertime too, but in the summertime it's absolutely horrendous. And he would take a nap. He would give me $2 or $3, which 1984, 5, it was a lot of money. But now I was able to go rent 3 or 4 movies, come home, sit down in front of the couch where he was laying, pop in a movie and watch it. And I was able to do that on my own, you know. And there weren't a lot of things that I was able to do completely on my own, especially with my dad, because my dad, he was even more so protective of me than my mom. My mom wanted me to learn, you know, stuff, and my father just wasn't sure what I could and couldn't learn. So and I don't know how my father felt about the bullying, because he never expressed it to me, you know what I mean? He just didn't talk about it. My mother I knew because she was emotional, you know, but I don't know how my father felt. I know he tried to be there and be helpful for me, you know, in terms of going to the school with my mom and stuff. I remember one day, evidently they kept me after. I don't even remember. I kicked it, sorry. Why? But it was my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Garabedian. I actually liked Mrs. Garabedian. I was one of the few kids that actually liked Mrs. Garabedian. Mrs. Garabedian was a little bit physical with some of the kids. She wouldn't have dreamed of doing that with me. But I really liked her. And she got me after for some reason, and it was pouring. So, special ed teacher, who was right across the hall from my 6th grade class, gave me her umbrella to walk home with, and they told me to walk through the path in the woods. I didn't understand that they didn't want my parents, if they came up the hill, to see me walking down the hill, because I was already darn late. So when I got home, my aunt was waiting for me on the stairs, because my aunt and uncle lived upstairs and we lived downstairs in the furthest house in the back that I showed you in that video. And matter of fact, there's a picture of the house in my intro, in the top right corner of my intro, because that's the house I grew up in. So I put it in my intro as part of my life. Anyway, so my parents went up there because Dad got home, and Dad and I used to race home because we got home basically at the same time. And I wasn't there. They were both in a panic. They went up to the school. They asked Auntie Holly to wait for me. She was waiting on the stairs when I walked in the door between the 2 apartments, where the stairs were and where the hall was leading into my apartment. And she stopped me. She had me come up and sit with her and asked me what happened. And my parents came in almost right after that. My mother had torn apart the classroom, evidently, throwing desks and chairs, according to her later on. She told me this later on, as an adult. And they had been told, you know, that I had been sent home, and I'd been sent through the path in the woods, which I was not supposed to take, according to the school. What's really strange, though, is they specifically wanted me to take, this is hard to explain, but we had different paths through the woods. The woods were our playground. That's why, and you'll see in that video, if you watch that video, I show you the fencing. That whole area of woods that we explored, there we go, was all fenced off, and it just bothered me. But yeah, my mother was a great advocate for me, both in terms of bullying, in terms of teachers, in terms of everything. And I was, and medically, sorry about that, I didn't mean to hit the tripod. Excuse me, I was very fortunate. I know that. And so they came in almost right after I did. And I was sitting on the steps with Annie Holly, on the stairs with Annie Holly, and what happened? And I told my mother. They told me to go through that put her through the roof. It's hard to tell with my father, but that put my mother through the roof. And but as I was saying, we had a couple of paths that we could take, because the side of the road that the school was on the side of the road the school was on, was like a ditch where we would play King of the Hill, because it would go down into a ditch, and a deep ditch. You could throw a body down there, and the only one that's going to find it is a kid walking up that hill if they're fooling around on their way to school. Trust me, nobody driving is going to find anything there. Not that I want to try that theory, but I'm just saying. And so, one of our paths actually led to that ditch, to that hill, and we would sometimes use that path. But our main path, you had to go down the hill, and when you got to the bottom of the hill where the, well, at the time it was the town hall, it's now the post office, you would go through a maybe 10-20 foot long strip that led directly to my house. You could see my house from the road. Yet the teachers would get mad and want me to walk down to the end and down Main Street. So when they absolutely forced us to walk down Main Street, we would cut in at the Methodist church, or before that, in what we called Moose Head. Don't ask me where the name of that building came from, Moose Head, because I have absolutely no idea. If you're from the local area and you have an idea, let me know in the comments, because I don't have a clue. Never did. I even asked, and my parents didn't have a clue. But that's what it was called. So we would either cut in at Moose Head, we would cut in at the post office, somewhere along the way, unless they absolutely made us walk all the way down the street and all the way down the driveway. A driveway which, if I'm playing in that driveway, I was not allowed to go past the there are a series of garages for some of the, that used to be for some of the residents, like mostly the landlord used it for storage, I think. The resident that lived in the house in the front that was on the opposite, I don't know how to explain it. There were 4 middle house, big house in the front. On the, well, if you're looking out toward the street, left. Then there was a house on the right. The house on the right actually did use one of those garages, but I was not allowed to go past those garages. But walking home from school, I had to come in that driveway where I wasn't allowed to be if I was at home. Does that make any sense in anybody's world? Certainly doesn't in mine, but this got off track from bullying, but that's okay, because I'm more or less telling you about my life and the reasons why I was bullied. I know that I wasn't the easiest kid to get along with. And I used to say all the time, and I said this in my podcast, why do they judge a book by a cover? Don't judge a book by its cover. And I think now, what the hell is wrong with my cover? There's nothing wrong with my cover. That's not what they were doing. Other kids who've not been exposed to differences don't understand them. And it's funny, because I never realized that I didn't understand my own differences. You know? It was something that much later on, my mother and I took on to understand. United CP sent us paperwork. I have left-sided hemiplegia. I have severe spasms in my thighs that are pain I wouldn't wish. Well, the saying goes, on my worst enemy. I don't have a worst enemy. I don't really have enemies. I don't waste my time with that, you know. But I wouldn't wish that pain on absolutely anybody. It is excruciating, atrocious pain. I have been watching a new vlogger, Rachel. It's House of Hughes. They have a little boy, also with CP, who also goes through those spasms, and his muscles tighten up so much he can't move. And it's interesting watching her and her husband Hunter. They're just wonderful parents. They're so faithful in the Lord, and I highly recommend their channel. I'll link it at House of Hughes in this vlog, but because I think it's important that we understand there are many different kinds of disabilities, and I've been watching actually a lot of disability vloggers. Some I like better than others, which is, you know, personality more than anything. It's some of the parents I vibe with better, as Rachel would say, than others in terms of watching their channel. But it's nothing personal against anyone. It's just my own, what I like and what I don't. And I just think that schools need to educate kids on, yes, this person may be different, but think about how they're the same. Think about how you're breaking their heart when you exclude them from activities. You know, when you invite your class, but you don't invite them to your birthday party, which as a parent you should not allow. It's happened, trust me. But as a parent, you shouldn't allow it. If you're going to allow your child to invite their class to their birthday party, it should be their whole class. That's my opinion. I was always told, you do not give out invitations in front of someone you are not inviting, because it's rude, it's wrong, and it's inappropriate. And so And I remember one time, one of my teachers, I can't remember who it was, I want to say it was Mrs. Normandin. I think it was. In 4th grade. She set us in a circle because she was tired of the bullying. And, you know, the things that were going on. And she said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're all going to write down something nice about each other. And we're going to read it to each other. Almost no one had anything nice to say about me. I'll never forget that. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to make me feel better. And everybody refused to say something nice about me. And it really ticked her off. And I don't know why that just came into my mind, maybe because I'm talking about bullying. But that teacher was wonderful. She lives with her daughter now in Tennessee, and I still keep in contact with her, and I'm almost positive it was her that did that. And I know, like I said, that she was trying to make us all see the good in each other, you know what I mean? And I think she got like 2 people to say something nice about me, you know, and it just was not, she wanted to teach us there was something good in all of us, and it just, unfortunately, kids are kids, you know, kids, unfortunately, you know, they say kids are mean. Yeah, they are, but we can teach them not to be, just like I said in my podcast. We can teach them not to be. Now, I'll give you the same example that I gave in my podcast. I had just started 8th grade, and I'm in the hallway, well, I'm in the stairs had their own little, like, stairwell, almost room thing. You'd go in the door, you'd go down the stairs, and next to the stairs, on the left, if you're standing on the stairs, it's on the left, is just a space, a cement space, like the stairwell. And then you'd open the door and you, well, I got caught in there by a girl who'd been bullying me the year before. Oh, she's gonna beat me up. There's nowhere for me to go. This is all cement. I'm screwed. And she didn't. She stuck out her hand. Well, and she didn't. She said to me, well, she asked me if she could talk to me, and I'm scared to death. And she knew I was scared. And we stepped to the side. We were talking. She said, you know, at the end of the school year last year, you told the principal what I was doing to you. I said, no, I didn't. She said, well, somebody did. And I got suspended for the last month of school. I said, I didn't know that. That would have been 7th grade. And she said, well, my parents were pretty ticked off about the way I treated you. I got myself suspended and grounded. So, but I learned so much. She extended her hand to me and asked me if I would be her friend. But yeah, absolutely. She was so good to me that year. You would not believe how much she tried to make up for how rotten she'd been the year before, just because her parents taught her something over the summer, because her parents were amazing parents. And I'm going to cry. I'm sorry. And when I went home and told my mother said, oh my God, that little girl has amazing parents. I wish I could meet them and thank them. These are happy tears. And I remember leaving that school in the last quarter of 9th grade. And I went to the school I graduated from. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was allowed to defend myself if I needed to. I was allowed to be A people me. A person. I was a person. With thoughts and feelings. Yes, there was one boy who was a complete jerk. But overall, I was a person. And I was allowed to defend myself. And I started to feel good about myself, you know? And I started to have, we would go on field trips. And we did them on Saturdays. And there were girls that would actually hang out with me at the mall during the field trip. And it was like, holy cow, somebody wants to hang out with me, you know? And I had a friend who's still my friend to this day, Cheryl, who asked me to go to the mall with her on a weekend with her and her mom. My dad dropped me off at her house. All of a sudden, a world opened up to me. I mean, in elementary school, I had a couple of friends. And I'm very blessed that even some of those who were so mean to me in elementary school have grown up so much. And a group of us do meet for a meal and to reminisce every couple of months, and it's fun. And, the boy that actually set it all up was someone that I've always gotten along with, someone who adored my parents, because he used to work with my dad. And I'm probably running my makeup, but anyway. So I've been blessed as an adult to, and it's funny, you know, to see these people in a different light, and I truly do, you know, and it's easy to not see, you know, to stay in that place of anger or whatever, but when you actually get to talk to the person and say, why did you do this? And she looks at you and says, oh my God, I don't even remember doing that. I am so sorry. And you know she's sincere, you move on. I do understand the boy that beat me up and said those horrible words ended up addicted to drugs, unfortunately. I was told that years later. Hopefully he has cleaned his life up. I really don't know. I just know that. And the weird thing was, in the classroom, this kid was really nice to me. Such a talented artist. He would draw. He was a horror movie guy, you know. He liked to draw like Jason with his machete and stuff, and he was so talented. And he loved to show me his work. We got out of recess and he was a different kid, and I didn't understand it. And the teacher couldn't explain it, you know. And by the way, the girl that punched me in the stomach for wanting to jump rope became my friend the following year. Don't know what happened. I don't know if she got in trouble by her parents, a similar situation to the junior high situation, or what it was, but, and I want to say one other thing. It doesn't have anything to do with bullying, but it's another school thing that drives me insane. You know, today, when something happens at a school, you know, a kid dies or something, they send in grief counselors, and they do this, and they do, and they care about how the kids feel. And I remember one of my friends, I'm going to try not to cry here, we were in 8th grade, and he was the sweetest kid, talented musician, and found out that he had terminal cancer, and he chose to go to a different school because he didn't want his friends to see him dying, to see him suffer, you know. But I'll always have those memories of him just tapping me on the back with his pencil eraser, and the eraser on the end of his pencil, and me turning around looking at him, and him giving me that big grin, or him going like this, just lightly, and me turning and looking at him and him giving me that big grin in our reading class. I love you, Wade. I will always carry you in my heart. I remember going into the auditorium for something, and I remember we had all just found out. We were all really upset, and his best friend was crying. His male best friend, who's also in that class. There were only 6 of us in that class. 2 girls and 4 boys. The other girl and I didn't have any other classes together, didn't really know each other. The 2 boys I sat in the front with, one was in SAD with me, the other one was friends with a friend of mine from my youth group, and we would meet at his house and stuff and play trivia games and stuff with his parents and my parents and just all sorts of things. So my mother knew him well. And I was very fortunate in that class that there were 6 of us, and we were a tight group, you know. So to have one of us have a diagnosis like that, hi Mrs. Roach, that was the teacher, was devastating. Well, they didn't send anybody to talk to any of us, you know. So when I grew up and they started doing that regularly, it was like, where were you when our parents had to figure out what the hell to say to us? You know? Where were you when that poor little boy was crying? Where were you when I was at home and my mother worked with, I believe, well, somebody in his family anyway, at the time, and my mother had to tell me that no, he's not going to make it. It is bad. And I just remember walking around the kitchen table, crying, trying to process how a 14-year-old was going to die. And my poor helpless parents are just standing, they don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. They're just helpless. They just have to stand there and let their child grieve. And that's really all you can do. But where were these so-called grief counselors and stuff like that in our school when that happened? They weren't there. You know, where was a counselor to come in and talk to us when I saw a little boy almost die right in front of me? Little Glenn. We were playing on the monkey bars together. The big monkey bars at the top of the hill. And he reached up and he was going to hold on to the solid bar to swing on. And I figured he could almost stand up and hold on to it because he was very tall. And he let go of it. And I really didn't think he was going to get hurt when he fell, because he was so tall. I figured he'd land on his feet or he'd tumble, but he would be fine. You know, he'd land on his feet or he'd land, you know, some way with his legs and tumble. I had no idea he was going to land flat on his face. And when he did, he inhaled the turf, which about maybe beginning of that school year or late the year before, I'm not sure, they had put down the recycled rubber tire turf. You know, the little curly cues of recycled rubber tire they use on playgrounds. He wasn't breathing. He was just laying on his face. Myself and another kid ran and got, well, one kid ran and got the teacher, or I did, I can't remember, and myself and another kid ran in the school and got the school nurse. That wasn't a short trip, because he was up on the hill. We had to run down the hill, across the dirt, all the way to the other end of the school, get in, and then walk down the hall to the other end of the hall to get to the nurse's office to get help. That woman ran faster than I knew she could run. She was so mad. When she got up there, she flipped him over very carefully, and I remember she was doing the milk and sweep method that we're taught in CPR class, trying to get the turf out of his mouth. And I remember seeing her doing CPR, rescue breathing. That's something you don't forget when you're a little kid. He did go to the hospital for a couple of days, but he ended up okay. She was just mad. Put this stuff down, these kids inhale it. This is supposed to be safe. I'm digging it out of this kid's airway. And I just remember, she was just sputtering. That's the word I was looking for. And so upset. And I remember the ambulance came. They got him on the stretcher with the backboard and the neck brace and the whole bit. Cause I was the one playing alone with him when it happened. And I'll never forget it. I'm not sure he has any memory of it. But I always felt bad for him anyway, because I remember being in the resource room with him. I was in the regular classroom for reading, but they would also have me do reading in the resource room, more for comprehension, I think. But they put him and I together, and our levels were so different. I felt terrible. And I used to say to my mother, this is not fair to him, you know? And I remember someone telling me much later, well, it wasn't really fair to you either because you were so far ahead. But it would frustrate him to no end because I could read 9 miles ahead of him, and as he was trying to read one sentence, and I always felt so bad. I don't think that two people on such different planets should be put together, making either one of them feel bad about themselves because they're not on the same learning level. Well, nobody's on the same learning level, but you could put someone who is close to the same learning level. So you're not frustrating a poor kid by reading 9 miles ahead of him, and frustrating the other kid because you're waiting 10 minutes for a person to read a single sentence that you've already read 5 sentences ahead of, and you have to go back and find where he ended off to read again what you just read. So it's, and I think one thing that causes bullying is putting kids together and telling them to do this together, and they're on different planets of levels. If you have 2 kids do a report together, you have one that's an uber genius and one that's average, or one that maybe has a bit of a learning difficulty and one that is an uber genius, or whatever it may be, then that causes friction between kids. Fortunately, him and I had pretty much 1-on-2 with the teacher in that situation, so it really didn't cause a problem between him and I, except for frustration on both of our parts. But I still think about him often. I remember seeing him in the grocery store after the accident with his mom. He was kind of rude, and his mom, why are you being rude, you know? But he probably didn't want to think about the accident, you know? And it was right after. You know, and I wanted to know how he was and everything, me being Little Miss Impulse Control, or lack thereof. I wanted to know how he was and stuff, and it probably wasn't the appropriate time. It was too close, you know. I know that now as an adult, but so I don't even blame him. My mother recalls a boy who became my friend as an adult, who's passed away, being mean to me in the store, and his mother going off. My mother said I loved his mother. She said I actually ended up meeting her a couple of times. She said that his mother did not tolerate that. And I guess he said, oh Mom, everybody does it, or something like that. And she said, well, you're not everybody, and you're not going to be mean to her, something like that. And I didn't remember it. He remembered it because we talked about it. He said, yeah, that was my mom. He said, and I'm glad she did that. She was right. you know, looking back at it as a 40-year-old, you know. And I said, the thing is, I never understood why you did that to me, because I used to stick up for you. Because the kid that bullied him, who was, although smaller than him, much tougher and stronger than him, I could tell him to knock it off, and he wouldn't even hesitate to knock it off. Wouldn't say a word to me, and was always a sweetheart to me, and everybody would say, I can't believe you think he's a sweetheart. Well, he always was to me. And come to find out, his father and my father grew up together. And he knew it. Matter of fact, that's how one of the boys that was being so mean to me in the resource room one year stopped. Because I went to my dad, I told him who it was. My dad said, oh yeah? He said, his father is not like that, because he grew up with his dad. And he got on the phone. It was the one time that my dad physically did something on his own as far as that stuff, because it's just, Dad's very shy, Dad's very non-confrontational and stuff, but this was his buddy. And this was his buddy's kid. His buddy's kid wasn't going to be hurting his daughter, wasn't going to be making fun of his daughter. He called his buddy. His buddy said, oh, is that right? Come over here. And his buddy told him, you bother my buddy's kid again, you're dead meat. Which was an expression in the 80s. It didn't mean anything literal. It was just an expression in the 80s, but he didn't bother me again. So, I think sometimes it's good to know someone. But like I said, I was the only one that could tell, or that had the guts to tell my friend's bully to leave him alone. And he would. And it wasn't until much later that I found out that it was because our fathers grew up together. They knew each other very well. And he had a rough life, and I knew he had had a rough life. He had lost his mom at a very young age, and so hearing that later on made a lot of sense why he might have been bullying another kid and beating up on another kid. But it's no excuse, it's just facts. The only thing I truly feel bad about, and always have, and I remember, you know, my mother used to say to me that kids pick on kids who are picked on, pick on kids so that they can get it off of them for a minute. And I never understood that until I was with a boy, and his last name was Ferris, and we called him Ferris Wheel. He didn't like that. I felt horrible when I saw that he was actually hurt by it, but for the moment that I was doing it, nobody was picking on me at that moment. But it wasn't worth it, you know, because he didn't like to be called Ferris Wheel, which I didn't know until I saw his face. So that never happened again. I wouldn't even call that bullying so much as